Welcome to the channel The Coin Hunter, and if you've been setting aside quarters from the mid-1990s, thinking they're too recent to hold any significant value, the 1996 D. Washington quarter is about to challenge everything you thought you knew about modern coin collecting. This particular date and mint mark combination has created something remarkable in the numismatic marketplace. And at a heritage auction sale, specimens in exceptional condition have reached valuations that put this coin firmly in the category of serious investment-grade pieces, with the finest known examples documented at prices reaching into significant five-figure territory that makes this Denver-minted quarter one of the most sought-after modern coins in American numismatics. Now, I know what you're thinking. How can a quarter for 1996 possibly command this kind of attention when you remember these coins circulating freely during the Clinton administration? The answer lies in a perfect storm of factors that experienced collectors understand creates genuine rarity in a marketplace, starting with mintage figures that tell only part of the story. The Denver Mint produced these quarters during a year when the economy was strong. Electronic transactions were beginning to reshape how Americans used physical currency, and something fascinating was happening in the coin collecting world that would dramatically affect which coins survived in pristine condition. The 1996 D. Washington quarter had a mintage of approximately 906 million pieces, which on the surface suggests these should be readily available. But here's where your decades of life experience becomes valuable insight. You remember 1996. You remember using quarters for parking meters, vending machines, laundromats, and toll booths, and every single one of those uses meant wear, damage, and the gradual destruction of numismatic quality. The overwhelming majority of those 906 million quarters went straight into circulation, where they served their intended purpose as working currency, getting scratched against other coins and cash registers, dropped on concrete, handled by millions of people, and subjected to all the environmental factors that destroy the pristine surfaces coin collectors prize. What makes the 1996 D particularly significant is the collector behavior of that era. In 1996, the state quarter program was still 3 years away from revolutionizing American coin collecting, and without that massive public engagement with quarter collecting, relatively few people were setting aside rolls of uncirculated quarters from regular production years. Professional coin dealers weren't stockpiling bags of these coins because there was no particular reason to expect future demand, and the few collectors who were building date-in-mint sets of Washington quarters were a relatively small group compared to the explosion of interest that would come later. If you're finding this information valuable, I'd appreciate your subscription to The Coin Hunter so we can continue bringing you thoroughly researched content that respects your intelligence and delivers the detailed analysis serious collectors deserve. Now let's talk about what separates a common 1996 D quarter worth face value from examples that have sold through major auction houses for prices that would make anyone take notice. It all comes down to grade, and specifically the condition category known as mint state, with numerical grades assigned by professional services like PCGS and NGC that precisely quantify preservation quality. A 1996 D. Washington quarter that spent even a few days in circulation will show where on the high points, particularly on Washington's cheekbone, the hair details above his ear, and the eagle's breast feathers on the reverse. And these circulated pieces are worth exactly 25 cents because they serve their purpose as currency. However, examples that somehow escaped circulation entirely and were preserved in original uncirculated condition occupy a completely different value category. And as you move up the grading scale from MS-63 through MS-65 and into the MS-66 to MS-68 range, the population numbers drop dramatically and the prices increase exponentially. According to PCGS population reports, which provide the most reliable data on how many coins have been professionally graded at each level, the 1996 D. Washington quarter becomes genuinely scarce in grades above MS-66. And by the time you reach MS-67, you're looking at a coin that represents perhaps one in several thousand submitted examples. The technical aspects that graders evaluate include strike quality, how completely the dies impress the design details into the planchet, surface preservation including the absence of contact marks, bag marks, or handling evidence, luster quality, meaning the original mint bloom remains undisturbed. And eye appeal, which encompasses the overall visual impact when you examine the coin under proper lighting. Here's what even experienced collectors sometimes overlook about modern quarters and ultra-high grades. These coins must be absolutely exceptional to achieve ratings in the MS 67 and above range, because grading standards for modern coins are extremely strict compared to older issues where some technical imperfections are accepted as inherent to antique production methods. The next coin we're examining has documented auction results from an even earlier decade that demonstrate how Denver Mint quarters from specific years have created remarkable opportunities for collectors. A 1996 D quarter that grades MS 67 with strong strike, clean surfaces, and outstanding luster represent a coin that survived nearly 3 decades without acquiring any of the tiny imperfections that would prevent it from achieving this elite status. And when you consider that most people handle these coins as spending money, grab them from change with no thought to preservation, and use them in commerce without any protective considerations, the survival of truly pristine examples becomes the remarkable achievement that justifies the significant premiums documented at major auctions. The market for high-grade modern quarters has evolved substantially over the past 2 decades, driven partly by registry-set collectors who compete to assemble the finest possible collections, with each coin certified and graded for inclusion in online ranking systems maintained by PCGS and NGC. And these serious collectors will pay substantial premiums for coins that grade even 1 point higher than readily available examples. For the 1996 D. Washington quarter, the population data reveals the critical dividing line. There are tens of thousands of examples certified in the MS 64 to MS 66 range where values remain relatively modest. But as you cross into MS 67 territory, the population drops to perhaps a few hundred examples, and in MS 68, which represents near-perfect preservation, the population might be counted in dozens rather than hundreds. Stay with me, because what's coming next involves a 1980s quarter with market dynamics that reveal fascinating patterns in how collectors value coins from recent decades. When we examine actual auction results from Heritage Auctions, Stack's Bowers, and Great Collections, the 3 major firms that dominate the rare coin market, we can document precisely what serious collectors have paid for top-grade examples of this date. An MS 67 specimen might bring anywhere from several hundred to over $1,000, depending on the specific visual characteristics and market conditions at the time of sale, while the rare MS 68 examples, representing the finest of the fine, have commanded prices in the multiple thousands of dollars, reaching levels that would surprise anyone who assumes modern quarters can't be valuable. The authentication and certification process matters enormously for these coins, because the difference between MS 66 and MS 67 represents thousands of dollars in value, and only PCGS and NGC certifications carry full market credibility for establishing these grade distinctions. Raw coins, or those graded by lesser-known services, simply don't command the same buyer confidence or achieve comparable prices. If you possess 1996 D quarters, particularly if they came from mint sets, original rolls, or were deliberately preserved in protective holders from the year of issue, having them examined by a reputable dealer or submitted for professional grading makes financial sense, because the cost of certification is modest compared to the potential value if you happen to own one of those elusive high-grade survivors. The technical examination process involves inspecting the coin under magnification to count and assess contact marks, evaluating the strength of strike by examining the finest design details, analyzing the luster pattern under angled lighting to ensure the mint's original surface texture remains intact, and making an overall determination of eye appeal that factors in how all these elements combine into the coin's visual presentation. Fellow collectors, if this analysis has been helpful, consider subscribing and sharing with others who appreciate serious numismatic information that goes beyond surface-level hype to deliver the kind of detailed research that makes a real difference in your collecting decisions. Looking at the broader context of Washington quarter collecting, the 1996 D occupies an interesting position as one of the last regular issue quarters before the state quarter program fundamentally changed American coin collecting beginning in 1999. And this historical placement adds a layer of significance for collectors building comprehensive sets who recognize this date as marking the end of an era. The Philadelphia Mint also struck quarters in 1996 without the D Mint mark, and while both dates are valuable in top grades, the Denver issue has slightly different market dynamics based on population reports and collector preferences that have evolved over time. When you're examining potential candidates for grading, look for quarters that have never been in circulation, meaning they should show absolutely no wear on the high points, and ideally they'll come from sources like mint sets, bank rolls that were never opened, or collections that were carefully preserved in albums or holders that prevented contact with other coins. The coin should have brilliant, unimpaired luster, that original mint surface texture that looks like finely textured satin under proper lighting, and the fewer contact marks visible even under magnification, the better your chances of achieving a grade that makes the certification cost worthwhile. Remember that even minor imperfections that seem insignificant to the naked eye can prevent a coin from reaching the MS 67 and above grades, where the serious money enters the picture. So conservative expectations are wise, but the potential reward of discovering a truly exceptional example justifies the investigation for anyone with preserved quarters from this date. The comparison to what these coins could have purchased in 1996 provides interesting perspective. That same quarter might have bought you a local phone call from a pay phone, contributed to a gallon of gas that cost around $1.25, or a cover part of a newspaper that sold for 50 cents, and now, if it survived in perfect condition, it could be worth hundreds or thousands of times its face value based purely on its state of preservation and the collector demand for genuinely scarce examples in. Exceptional grades. This is the fascinating reality of modern numismatics, where age becomes less important than condition rarity, and coins from recent decades can achieve remarkable values when they represent the finest survivors from their year and mint mark combination. The investment perspective on high-grade modern quarters like the 1996 D involves understanding that you're buying into a market driven by serious collectors with specific goals, whether that's registry set competition, completing comprehensive date and mint collections at the highest possible grade levels, or accumulating coins that represent genuine condition scarcity despite being from recent production years. The market has demonstrated consistent demand for these top population coins, and while no investment is guaranteed, the limited supply of MS 67 and especially MS 68 examples creates a scarcity equation that supports current valuations and suggests continued collector interest for the foreseeable future. Next, 1983 D, the Washington quarter, and here's a coin that takes us back to the Reagan administration, a year when you might remember the economy recovering from recession, television introducing us to the final episode of MAS*H that drew a record audience, and quarters still bought enough to make them meaningful in your pocket. But today, certain examples of this Denver minted quarter from 1983 have achieved documented sales through prestigious auction houses that place them in the category of serious five-figure numismatic properties. At major auctions conducted by Heritage and other leading firms, the finest certified examples of the 1983 D Washington quarter have reached valuations that rival significant rare coins from much earlier eras, with prices for the absolute best specimens climbing to heights that make this a coin every serious collector should understand, particularly if you saved rolls or mint sets from the early 1980s when these quarters were minted. The 1983 D came from a mintage of approximately 546 million pieces produced at the Denver Mint, and like we discussed with the 1996 D, those mintage figures tell you how many coins were made, but reveal almost nothing about how many survive in the pristine, uncirculated condition that creates genuine value in today's marketplace. You remember 1983? You remember using quarters for everything from arcade games to parking meters, to vending machines that still accepted coins as the primary payment method, and every single one of those transactions meant another coin entering circulation where it would accumulate the wear, contact marks, and surface imperfections that destroy numismatic grade. The vast majority of those 546 million quarters did exactly what they were designed to do. They circulated as currency, changed hands millions of times, got dropped, scratched, cleaned with harsh chemicals by well-meaning individuals, and gradually deteriorated from mint-fresh condition to worn coins worth only their face value. What creates the remarkable value in top-grade 1983D quarters is the combination of relative scarcity and ultra-high grades. Strong collector demand driven by registry, set competition, and date and mint completion goals. And the simple reality that very few people in 1983 had any reason to believe quarters from current production would ever be valuable enough to justify careful preservation. Professional dealers weren't stockpiling bags of uncirculated 1983 D quarters because the coin collecting market of that era focused primarily on older coins with established rarity and collector interest, and the typical collector building a Washington quarter set was simply trying to find one example of each date and mint mark in decent condition, not competing to own the finest known specimen of every single year. This collector behavior, or lack thereof, in the early 1980s created the condition scarcity we see today when population reports from PCGS and NGC reveal just how few examples have achieved the elite MS 67 and MS 68 grades that command the premium prices documented at major auctions. Let's talk specifically about what separates a 1983 D quarter worth 25 cents from examples that have sold for prices that would buy you a nice vacation or make a significant contribution to your retirement account. A circulated 1983 D quarter, even one in nice condition with light wear, is worth face value because millions of similar examples exist and collectors can find them readily. There's simply no scarcity and therefore no premium. However, when we enter the realm of coins that never circulated, preserved in original mint condition, and subsequently certified by PCGS or NGC in mint state grades, we're discussing an entirely different category of collectible. An MS-64 or MS-65 example of the 1983 D might bring a modest premium of a few dollars over face value. Nice to own, but not particularly scarce because thousands of examples exist at these grade levels. The magic happens as you move up into MS-66, where the population begins thinning noticeably, and then into MS-67, where we're talking about perhaps a few hundred examples out of that original mintage of 546 million coins, representing a survival rate so small it's difficult to calculate in meaningful percentages. Coming up, we'll look at an early 1970s quarter that demonstrates how coins from recent decades can achieve valuations that surprise even experienced collectors who remember these pieces in active circulation. When a 1983 D Washington quarter receives an MS-67 grade from PCGS or NGC, it means the coin has passed incredibly stringent examination by professional graders who evaluated every square millimeter of both surfaces under magnification, counting and assessing any contact marks for mint production or bag storage, analyzing the completeness and strength of strike to ensure all design details were fully impressed by the dies, examining the luster to verify that the original mint surface texture remains undisturbed by handling or environmental exposure, and determining that the overall eye appeal merits this elite designation. These MS-67 coins must be virtually flawless to the naked eye and show only the most minor imperfections under magnification. We're talking about tiny marks that would be invisible in a photograph and require high-power magnification to detect, the kind of minute characteristics that separate excellent from exceptional. The difference between MS-66 and MS-67 might be one or two barely visible marks in secondary locations. But in terms of market value, that difference can represent hundreds or thousands of dollars because collectors competing for the finest available examples are willing to pay significant premiums for each incremental improvement in grade. Now, when we reach the MS-68 level for the 1983 D Washington quarter, we're discussing coins so rare that the population might be counted in dozens rather than hundreds, specimens that represent the absolute finest survivors from an original mintage of over 500 million coins, pieces that somehow made it through mint production without significant contact marks. got properly stored in protective packaging immediately after minting, and remained in that pristine state for 40-plus years, until they were submitted for professional certification. Supporting this channel with a subscription helps us invest in better research and content. So if you're finding this worthwhile, I'd welcome your support as we continue delivering the kind of detailed numismatic analysis that respects your intelligence and experience as collectors. The documented auction results for high-grade 1983 D quarters tell a compelling story about market demand and collector competition. MS 67 examples routinely bring prices in the hundreds to low thousands of dollars, depending on specific quality characteristics and the overall coin market conditions at the time of sale, while the rare MS 68 specimens have achieved prices in the five-figure range that place them among the most valuable Washington quarters from the clad coinage era. These aren't theoretical prices or asking prices you might see in optimistic listings. These are actual realized auction prices from Heritage Auctions, Stack's Bowers, and Great Collections, the firms that dominate the rare coin market and whose sale results are documented and accessible for verification. When a major auction house catalogs a 1983 D quarter in MS 68 with exceptional eye appeal, strong strike, and pristine surfaces, the bidding often becomes competitive among advanced collectors who understand they're looking at one of perhaps only a few dozen coins at this grade level from the entire surviving population. The next coin in our examination comes from an even earlier decade and involves market dynamics that reveal important patterns in modern quarter values. The technical aspects of evaluating these coins require knowledge that even experienced collectors might not possess if they haven't specifically studied modern quarter varieties and grading standards. So let me share some insights that could prove valuable if you're examining your own coins or considering what to have professionally certified. First, understand that the strike quality on 1983 D quarters varies considerably. Some examples show weak or incomplete details in critical areas like the hair definition above Washington's ear or the eagle's breast feathers on the reverse. And while these might still technically grade MS 67 based on surface preservation, coins with weak strikes typically bring lower prices than fully struck examples with crisp, complete details in every design element. Second, the luster quality matters enormously. Coins stored in certain types of packaging or exposed to environmental conditions that cause toning or dulling of the original mint surface will be penalized in grading even if the surfaces are technically mark-free, because graders evaluate the completeness of the original mint luster as part of their assessment. Third, contact marks must be evaluated not just in terms of quantity, but also location and severity. A coin might have several small marks in the open field areas and still grade MS 67 if they're minor and don't detract significantly from eye appeal. But a single prominent mark on Washington's cheek or another primary focal area could prevent the coin from achieving the same grade, even if it has fewer total marks. Fourth, eye appeal is the subjective element that brings all these technical factors together. Two coins with similar mark counts and strike quality might receive different grades if one simply presents a more attractive, more appealing visual impression when you examine it under proper lighting. And this is where the experience and expertise of professional graders becomes crucial, because they're making judgments that balance objective criteria with aesthetic evaluation. If you value accurate, well-researched coin information, subscribing to the Coin Hunter ensures you won't miss future discoveries we uncover through detailed research and documentation of actual market results. For collectors who might have 1983 D quarters in their possession, the practical question becomes how to identify candidates worth the cost and effort of professional certification. And let me be clear that the vast majority of 1983 D quarters you'll encounter are circulated or low-grade uncirculated pieces that wouldn't justify certification costs. However, if you have quarters that came from 1983 mint sets, the United States Mint sold official sets that year containing uncirculated examples from both Philadelphia and Denver, from original bank-wrapped rolls that were never searched or opened, or from collections that were carefully assembled and preserved in the early 1980s. Those sources offer the best potential for high-grade survivors. When examining such coins, look for pieces that show absolutely no wear on the high points. Washington's cheekbone and the hair details should be fully sharp with no evidence of rubbing or friction, and the eagle's breast should show every feather detail completely defined. The luster should be brilliant and completely original, showing that fine, satiny texture that characterized coins as they left the mint presses, with no dullness, no toning that might indicate chemical exposure or environmental damage, and no evidence of cleaning, which is immediately obvious to professional graders and results in details grades rather than numerical grades. Use proper lighting and magnification to examine the surfaces for contact marks, paying particular attention to the cheek, the forehead, and the open field in front of Washington's face on the obverse, and on the reverse. Examine the field areas around the eagle and the areas above and below the bird where marks tend to be most visible. Fewer marks obviously improve your chances of a higher grade. But even coins that appear pristine to casual inspection often reveal numerous small marks under the magnification and lighting that graders use, so expectations should remain conservative. The investment and collecting perspective on the 1983 Washington quarter in high grades involves understanding several market realities that affect values and demand. First, this is not a coin with mainstream recognition like a 1916 Mercury dime or a 1909 SVB Lincoln cent where broad collector awareness drives constant demand, but rather a coin valued within the specialist community of Washington quarter collectors and modern coin enthusiasts who understand condition rarity. Second, the market for these coins is driven substantially by PCGS and NGC registry set collectors who are competing in rank competitions to assemble the finest sets, and these collectors will pay strong premiums for coins that improve their set ratings, creating reliable demand at the high end of the market. Third, the population reports are relatively stable at the MS 67 and MS 68 levels because most surviving high-grade examples have likely been certified already. New submissions occasionally improve the population slightly, but we're not seeing the kind of population growth that would suggest thousands of additional high-grade examples waiting to be discovered, which supports the scarcity equation that justifies current values. Fourth, compared to earlier Washington quarters from the 1930s, 1940s, and 1950s where silver content adds a base value component, these clad quarters from 1983 are valued purely on numismatic merit, the condition rarity and collector demand rather than any precious metal content, which means values are entirely dependent on maintaining collector interest in condition census coins from recent decades. Looking at the 1983 in the broader context of Washington quarter collecting reveals its significance as part of the clad coinage era that began in 1965 when silver was removed from quarter production, and for collectors building complete sets. Owning the finest available example of each date and mint mark becomes the goal once basic date and mint completion has been achieved. The 1983 represents one of those dates where achieving true high-grade representation requires substantial investment because of the population scarcity at elite levels, and serious collectors recognize this coin as one of the keys to building a world-class modern Washington quarter collection. Next, 1971, Washington quarter, and we're going back to the early years of the clad coinage era, a time when you might remember the Vietnam War winding down, the Postal Service issuing the first email, and quarters containing no silver because the composition had changed in 1965. Yet certain examples of this Denver minted quarter from 1971 have achieved auction results through major numismatic firms that place them among the most valuable Washington quarters from the modern era, with documented sales reaching price levels that demonstrate how condition rarity creates genuine value even in coins from recent decades that many collectors initially overlooked as too common or too recent to merit serious investment consideration. The finest certified examples of the 1971 Washington quarter, those exceptional specimens that achieved the elite MS 67 and MS 68 grades from PCGS or NGC, have sold through heritage auctions and other prestigious firms for prices that would surprise anyone who remembers these coins in everyday circulation. with the absolute best examples commanding valuations in the five-figure range that place this coin firmly in the category of serious numismatic properties worth researching carefully if you preserve quarters from the early 1970s. The Denver Mint produced approximately 258 million Washington quarters in 1971, which seems like a substantial mintage that should ensure ready availability. But as we've discussed with previous coins, mintage figures alone tell you nothing about how many examples survive in the pristine, uncirculated condition that creates value in today's collector market. And the reality is that the overwhelming majority of those 258 million quarters went directly into circulation, where they served as working currency for vending machines, parking meters, toll booths, laundromats, and all the other daily transactions that characterized American commerce in the early 1970s before credit cards and electronic payments became dominant. You lived through this era. You remember using quarters constantly for purposes that are now handled electronically, and every single one of those uses meant another coin getting worn, marked, scratched, and gradually destroyed from a numismatic standpoint until it became just a well-worn quarter worth face value rather than a collectible piece. The collector behavior in 1971 creates a fascinating chapter in the story of why high-grade examples are so scarce today. By 1971, the coin collecting boom that had characterized the 1960s was beginning to cool, and the switch from silver to clad composition in 1965 had diminished collector enthusiasm for modern quarters because they no longer contained precious metal. Professional coin dealers weren't stockpiling bags of uncirculated 1971 D quarters because there was no obvious reason to expect future demand, and the typical collector who bothered assembling a Washington quarter set in the early 1970s was simply pulling examples from circulation or perhaps buying single coins from dealers to fill holes in album boards, not pursuing mint-fresh specimens or paying attention to subtle grade differences that would later become crucial to value. This widespread lack of interest in carefully preserving modern quarters during the 1970s created the condition scarcity we observe today when we examine population reports from the major grading services and discover just how few examples have achieved the highest grades that command serious premiums in today's market. What's coming next takes us back another 4 years to examine a 1960s quarter with its own remarkable story about condition rarity and market demand. Let's discuss specifically what makes certain 1971 D quarters valuable while others remain worth only face value. Because understanding these distinctions is crucial if you're evaluating coins in your own collection or considering what might justify the cost of professional certification. A circulated 1971 D quarter that shows wear from use in commerce has no premium value regardless of how nice it might look. There are millions of lightly worn examples available, and collectors simply don't pay premiums for circulated modern quarters except in cases of significant errors or unusual varieties, which the standard 1971 D doesn't offer. However, coins that somehow escaped circulation entirely and survived in original uncirculated condition occupy a different value category entirely. And as we examine the grading spectrum from low mint state grades through the elite levels, we can see where the values begin climbing and where the serious money enters the picture. An MS-63 or MS-64 example of the 1971 D Washington quarter might be worth a few dollars. Nice to own, but not particularly scarce because these grades are readily available. The coin has original luster and no wear, but it shows enough contact marks from mint production and handling that it falls short of the truly premium grades. Moving up to MS-65 and MS-66, we see values increase modestly as the populations begin thinning and the coins become noticeably nicer with fewer marks and better overall presentation. But we're still talking about pieces that might bring tens of dollars rather than the dramatic premiums that characterize the top grades. The transformation occurs when we cross into MS-67 territory where the population drops dramatically, and we're looking at coins that represent perhaps 1 or 2 out of every 1,000 submitted examples, specimens that somehow survived 40-plus years since minting with virtually no evidence of contact marks, perfectly preserved original luster, strong strike details, and the overall aesthetic quality that earns elite grades from the toughest graders in the numismatic industry. Share this information with fellow collectors who appreciate substantive content, and subscribe to the Coin Hunter for continued quality research that delivers the kind of detailed analysis that makes a real difference in your collecting and investing decisions. When a 1971 D Washington quarter achieves an MS 67 grade from PCGS or NGC, it has passed rigorous examination that evaluated every aspect of the coin's condition. The obverse and reverse surfaces were inspected under magnification to identify and assess any contact marks, with graders noting both the quantity and severity of marks, as well as their locations, because marks on prominent design elements affect the grade more significantly than marks in less visible areas. The strike quality was analyzed to determine whether the dies fully impressed every design detail into the planchet, with particular attention to areas like Washington's hair above the ear, the details in his coat, and the eagle's breast feathers, which are known weak strike areas where incomplete detail can lower the grade even on otherwise mark-free coins. The luster was evaluated to ensure the original mint surface texture remains completely intact without any dulling, toning, or evidence of cleaning or environmental damage that would indicate the coin wasn't perfectly preserved throughout its existence. Finally, the overall eye appeal was assessed, that subjective but crucial element where graders determine whether the coin presents an exceptional visual impression when examined under proper lighting. Because two coins with similar technical characteristics might receive different grades if one simply looks more attractive and more appealing to the discerning eye. The MS 68 level for the 1971 D Washington quarter represents something truly exceptional. Coins so rare that the population can be counted in dozens rather than hundreds, specimens that made it through the entire production and storage process without acquiring the contact marks that nearly all coins receive during minting and initial handling. Pieces that were somehow immediately preserved in ideal conditions and remained undisturbed for decades until they were submitted for certification. The documented auction results for these top-grade 1971 D quarters provide concrete evidence of market values. MS 67 examples have sold for prices ranging from hundreds to low thousands of dollars, depending on specific quality factors and market conditions, while the rare MS 68 specimens have achieved prices reaching well into five figures when they come to auction, and serious collectors compete to own one of the finest surviving examples from the entire population. These prices aren't speculation or optimistic dealer asking prices. These are actual realized auction results from heritage auctions, Stax Bowers, and great collections where the hammer price reflects what collectors are genuinely willing to pay to own these exceptional coins. The coin we're about to examine features market dynamics from the 1960s that complete our picture of how modern quarters achieve remarkable values based purely on condition rarity. The practical considerations for collectors who might own 1971 D quarters involve understanding which sources offer the best potential for high-grade examples worthy of professional certification. And I want to be clear that the vast majority of 1971 D quarters are either circulated or lower-grade uncirculated pieces that wouldn't justify the cost of certification. However, quarters from 1971 mint sets, which the United States mints sold containing uncirculated examples from both mints, offer the best probability of high-grade survivors because these coins were specially handled and packaged for collectors rather than dumped into circulation. Original bank-wrapped rolls of quarters from 1971 that were never opened or searched represent another potential source, though finding such rolls is increasingly difficult as time passes and most have been examined by collectors or dealers. Coins from carefully preserved collections assembled in the early 1970s by knowledgeable collectors who understood proper storage and handling techniques might also yield high-grade candidates, particularly if they were stored in appropriate holders that prevented contact with other coins and protected them from environmental exposure. When examining potential candidates, apply the same criteria we've discussed. Absolutely know where on the high points, original brilliant luster showing that fine satiny texture characteristic of mint-fresh coins, minimal contact marks visible even under magnification, with any marks being small, and located in non-primary design areas. An overall exceptional eye appeal that suggests the coin might compete favorably with other certified examples. Your subscription and engagement help us invest in better research and content. So if you're finding this worthwhile, I'd welcome your support as we continue exploring the fascinating details that separate common coins from valuable collectibles. The broader context of the 1971 D in Washington quarter collecting reveals its significance as an early date in the clad coinage era, when collector interest in modern quarters was relatively low, creating the circumstances that produce today's condition scarcity. And serious collectors building comprehensive sets recognize that obtaining a truly high-grade example of this date requires substantial investment because of the population realities at elite grade levels. The comparison between what a quarter could buy in 1971 versus what a top-grade example brings today offers interesting perspective. That same 25 cents might have purchased a candy bar, paid for a few minutes on a parking meter, or contributed to a gallon of gas that cost around 36 cents. And now, if it survived an exceptional MS-68 condition, it could be worth tens of thousands of dollars based solely on its state of preservation and the collector demand for the finest. Available examples. This represents the essential principle of modern numismatics, where age becomes secondary to condition rarity, and coins from recent decades achieve remarkable values when they represent the absolute best survivors from their year and mint mark combination. The investment perspective on high-grade 1971 D quarters involves understanding that these are specialist coins valued within the community of Washington quarter collectors and modern coin enthusiasts rather than pieces with broad mainstream recognition. But within that collector community, the demand is real, the population is genuinely limited, and the price history demonstrates that serious collectors will pay substantial premiums to own exceptional examples that improve their collections or registry sets. The market has shown consistent support for these top population coins over time, and while no investment comes with guarantees, the fundamental scarcity equation, limited supply of MS-67 and especially MS-68 examples coupled with ongoing collector demand, supports the valuations we see documented at major auctions and suggests continued interest from collectors who appreciate condition rarity in modern coinage. Next, 1967 Washington quarter, and we've arrived at a date that takes us back to the mid-1960s when you might remember the Summer of Love, the first Super Bowl, and America deeply involved in the Vietnam War. But more significantly from a numismatic standpoint, 1967 marked only the third year of clad quarter production after the historic changeover from 90% silver composition to the copper-nickel clad format that continues today, and certain exceptional examples of this Philadelphia minted quarter without a mint mark have achieved documented auction results that place them at the absolute pinnacle of modern Washington quarter values, with the finest certified specimens selling through prestigious auction houses for prices that rival significant rarities from much earlier eras and demonstrate conclusively that condition rarity creates genuine value regardless of a coin's age or precious metal content. The record prices for museum-quality examples of the 1967 Washington quarter, those extraordinary pieces that achieved the nearly impossible MS-68 grade from PCGS or NGC and represent the finest survivors from an original mintage of over 1.5 billion coins, have reached into six-figure territory at major auctions conducted by Heritage and other leading numismatic firms, establishing this date as one of the most valuable regular issue quarters from the entire clad coinage era, and creating a compelling case study in how extreme condition scarcity generates premium valuations, even for coins that most people remember using as spending money just a few decades ago. Understanding why the 1967 Washington quarter commands such remarkable prices in top grades requires examining several interconnected factors that created the perfect storm of condition scarcity. And let's start with the historical context that makes this date particularly significant. The year 1967 fell during a transitional period in American coinage when the United States Mint was still ramping up production capacity to meet public demand for the new clad coins, while simultaneously dealing with a coin shortage that had plagued the nation since the mid-1960s, and the Mint's response included dramatically increased production runs, elimination of mint marks from all denominations to prevent hoarding by collectors who were blamed for the coin shortage, and changes in minting procedures and quality control as the focus shifted toward maximizing quantity rather than maintaining the production standards that had characterized earlier eras. The Philadelphia Mint produced approximately 1,524,031,848 Washington quarters in 1967. Read that number again because it's over 1.5 billion coins, an absolutely massive mintage that represented the Mint working at capacity to flood the economy with quarters and alleviate the shortage that was causing problems for commerce. You might assume that with such an enormous mintage, high-grade examples would be readily available. But the opposite is true, and the reasons reveal important insights about coin production, handling, and survival. First, understand that every single one of those 1.5 billion quarters was intended for immediate circulation. These weren't being struck for collectors or with any thought to numismatic preservation, but rather to serve as working currency in an economy that desperately needed coins. Second, the production methods and handling procedures at the Mint during this high-volume era meant that coins were subjected to rough treatment from the moment they left the presses, getting dumped into large bins, scooped into bags where they tumbled against each other, and shipped to Federal Reserve banks where they received additional handling before distribution to commercial banks and eventually into the hands of the public. Every stage of this process created contact marks, bag marks, and surface imperfections that degraded the coins from their as-struck condition to the marked, slightly impaired pieces that characterized typical Mint state coins of this era. Third, collector behavior in 1967 was dramatically affected by the Mint's decision to eliminate mint marks. Many collectors who had been setting aside coins from circulation or purchasing mint sets became frustrated and disengaged when the Mint removed mint marks, believing it eliminated the collecting challenge that made the hobby interesting. And consequently, fewer people were carefully preserving 1967 quarters than had been saving coins from earlier years. Fourth, the Mint actually stopped producing official mint sets in 1965, 1966, and 1967 as another measure to discourage hoarding and collecting, which meant that collectors didn't have access to specially handled, uncirculated coins packaged for preservation. If you wanted uncirculated 1967 quarters, you had to obtain them from bank rolls or through dealers who purchased bags from a mint, and these sources didn't offer the same level of quality control and careful handling that characterized coins in official mint sets. The coin we'll examine to close out this presentation involves these same market dynamics taken to their logical extreme in terms of documented values. All these factors combined to create a situation where, despite the massive mintage, genuinely pristine examples of the 1967 Washington quarter are extraordinarily rare. The vast majority went into circulation immediately and accumulated where, while even the uncirculated examples that survived tended to have numerous contact marks from the rough handling during production and distribution, making coins that could achieve elite grades of MS 67 and especially MS 68 remarkably scarce when we examine population reports from PCGS and NGC. If you're finding this information valuable, I'd appreciate your subscription to the Coin Hunter so we can continue bringing you thoroughly researched content that delivers the kind of detailed numismatic analysis that respects your intelligence and experience. And if you know fellow collectors who would appreciate this level of research, please share this video because growing our community helps us invest in even better content that serves serious collectors like you. Let's talk about the specific grading distinctions that separate common examples from the exceptionally valuable high-grade specimens that command the premium prices we're discussing, because understanding these differences is crucial whether you're evaluating your own coins or simply want to understand why certain pieces bring such remarkable prices at auction. A circulated 1967 quarter that shows anywhere from use in commerce has no premium value. It's worth face value, period, because millions of worn examples exist, and there's simply no collector demand for circulated modern quarters unless they exhibit significant errors or unusual varieties. Moving into uncirculated territory, an MS 63 or MS 64 example will have original luster and no wear, but it shows enough contact marks, bag marks, or surface imperfections that it grades in the lower mint state range, where values might be just a few dollars. Nice to own, but far from scarce. An MS-65 or MS-66 specimen represents a nicer coin with fewer marks and better overall appearance, and values increase to perhaps tens of dollars as the population thins somewhat. But we're still looking at coins that are available with some patience and represent achievable goals for collectors building sets in these grade levels. The transformation occurs when we enter MS-67 territory, where suddenly we're discussing coins that represent perhaps one in several thousand submitted examples. Pieces that somehow survive from 1967 to today with virtually no evidence of contact marks despite going through the mint's production process, handling, and packaging systems that marked nearly all the other coins from this massive production run. When you examine PCGS and NGC population reports for the 1967 Washington quarter, you see thousands of examples certified in the MS-64 through MS-66 range. But as you look at MS-67, the population drops dramatically to perhaps a few hundred specimens. And when you reach MS-68, you're looking at a population that might be counted in single digits or low double digits depending on the current census. We're talking about quite possibly fewer than 20 or 30 coins that have achieved this grade. From an original mintage of over 1.5 billion pieces, a survival rate so infinitesimally small that it almost defies calculation. Fellow collectors, if this analysis has been helpful, consider subscribing and sharing with others who appreciate serious numismatic information that goes beyond superficial hype to deliver the kind of substantive research that actually helps you make informed collecting and investing decisions. The technical requirements for achieving an MS-67 or MS-68 grade on a 1967 Washington quarter are extraordinarily stringent because grading standards for modern coins allow virtually no imperfections at these elite levels. We're talking about coins that must be essentially flawless to the naked eye and show only the most trivial, barely detectable marks under high magnification in non-primary locations. The strike must be full and complete with every design detail crisply defined, including the finest strands of Washington's hair above his ear and the individual breast feathers on the eagle, areas that often show weakness even on uncirculated examples because of die wear or insufficient striking pressure during production. The luster must be completely original and undisturbed, showing that fine, frosty texture characteristic of coins fresh from the mint dies, without any dulling, toning, cleaning evidence, or environmental damage that would indicate less than ideal preservation throughout the coin's existence. The surfaces must be essentially mark-free, with any contact marks being so tiny and so few that they don't detract from the coin's overall visual impact. And importantly, these marks must be in secondary locations rather than on primary design elements like Washington's face or the eagle's body, where even a single small mark can prevent a coin from achieving the highest grades. The eye appeal, that subjective but crucial element of grading, must be exceptional. The coin needs to present a stunning visual impression when examined under proper lighting, with beautiful luster, crisp details, clean surfaces, and overall aesthetic quality that makes you immediately recognize you're looking at something special. The documented auction results for top-grade 1967 Washington quarters provide concrete evidence of what serious collectors will pay to own the finest available examples of this date, MS-67 specimens, which already represent significant condition rarities, have sold for prices ranging from several hundred to several $1,000s, depending on specific quality characteristics and whether the coin exhibits particularly exceptional eye appeal or technical characteristics that make it stand out. Even among other MS-67 examples, the rare MS-68 coins, those museum-quality pieces that represent the absolute finest survivors from the original 1.5 billion mintage, have achieved prices at major auctions that reach into five figures and beyond, with the very best examples documented at prices that place this date among the most valuable regular-issue Washington quarters ever auctioned. These aren't theoretical values or wishful thinking. These are actual prices realized at heritage auctions, Stack's Bowers, great collections, and other prestigious firms where serious collectors compete to own exceptional numismatic material, and the sale records are publicly documented and available for verification, providing transparent evidence of what the market will pay for genuine condition rarities, even from recent production years. The authentication and certification process takes on critical importance for 1967 quarters because the difference between MS 66 and MS 67 might represent thousands of dollars in value, and the jump from MS 67 to MS 68 can mean tens of thousands of dollars. So having coins professionally evaluated and certified by PCGS or NGC becomes essential if you possess potential candidates worthy of consideration. Raw coins or pieces graded by lesser-known services simply don't command the same market confidence or achieve comparable prices because the PCGS and NGC brands represent decades of grading consistency, market acceptance, and the security of knowing that coins have been evaluated by the most experienced graders using the industry's most stringent standards. If you possess 1967 quarters, particularly if they came from sources like original bankrolls that were never opened, dealer stocks that were carefully preserved, or old collections that were assembled with attention to quality and proper storage, having them examined by a knowledgeable dealer or submitted directly for professional grading makes financial sense because the potential reward of discovering one of those elusive high-grade survivors far exceeds the modest cost of certification. When evaluating potential candidates, look for coins that show absolutely no wear of any kind. The highest points on Washington's cheek and hair should be fully detailed with no evidence of friction or rubbing, and the eagle's breast should show complete feather definition without any flatness or wear. The luster should be brilliant, completely original, and show that characteristic frosty or satiny texture that indicates the coin has never been cleaned, dipped, or subjected to any attempt at improvement that would be immediately obvious to professional graders and would result in a details grade rather than a straight numerical grade. Under magnification, examine the surfaces carefully for contact marks, paying particular attention to the field area in front of Washington's face, his cheek and forehead, and on the reverse, the field around the eagle and the areas above and below the bird where marks tend to be most visible against the smooth surfaces. Realistically, even coins that appear pristine to the naked, I often reveal numerous small marks under the magnification and lighting that graders use. So maintaining conservative expectations is wise, but the potential exists that you might own one of those rare survivors that truly merits elite-level certification. The investment in collecting perspective on high-grade 1967 Washington quarters involves understanding several market realities that affect values and drive collector demand. First, these are specialist coins valued primarily within the community of Washington quarter collectors, modern coin enthusiasts, and PCGS/NGC registry set competitors rather than pieces with broad mainstream recognition like classic rarities. But within that specialist community, the demand is intense, the population is genuinely limited, and the price history demonstrates strong collector willingness to pay significant premiums for the finest available examples. Second, the registry set competition maintained by PCGS and NGC provides ongoing demand for these top population coins because collectors competing in these ranked systems need the finest available examples to improve their set ratings, and they're willing to pay premiums for coins that grade even fractionally higher than readily available pieces. Third, unlike earlier Washington quarters from the 1930s and 1940s where silver content provides base value, these clad quarters from 1967 are valued entirely on numismatic merit, the condition rarity, and collector demand rather than any intrinsic metal value, which means prices are completely dependent on maintaining collector interest in condition census coins for modern production years. But the track record shows that this interest has remained strong and even increased over time as collectors have come to appreciate that age is less important than condition rarity in determining value. Fourth, the population reports for MS-67 and especially MS-68 examples of the 1967 Washington quarter have remained relatively stable over time, because most surviving high-grade examples have likely been certified already. Occasional new submissions appear, but we're not seeing population explosions that would suggest thousands of additional high-grade examples waiting to be discovered, which supports the scarcity equation that justifies current market values and suggests that these coins will remain genuinely rare regardless of future submission activity. The broader historical context of the 1967 Washington Quarter adds layers of interest for collectors who appreciate numismatic history beyond just the coins themselves. This date represents a fascinating moment in American coinage when the mint was responding to economic pressures, public demand for coins, and political decisions about how to manage the transition from silver to clad composition. And the elimination of mint marks, specifically in 1965 to 1967, represents a unique period that won't be repeated. Collectors building comprehensive Washington Quarter sets recognize the 1967 as one of the genuine condition rarities that requires substantial investment to obtain in truly high grades. And the coin occupies an important position in the series as one of the last dates before the return of mint marks in 1968, giving it a kind of terminus significance that adds to its appeal. The comparison between what a quarter could purchase in 1967 versus what the finest examples bring today offers perspective that highlights how dramatically numismatic values can diverge from face value based purely on condition rarity. That same 25 cents might have bought you a comic book, a candy bar, or several minutes on a parking meter in 1967, and gas was around 33 cents per gallon. So your quarter covered a meaningful portion of everyday purchases. But today, if that quarter survived in exceptional MS 68 condition, it could be worth hundreds of thousands of times its face value based solely on being one of the finest survivors from a massive mintage where virtually everything was destroyed through circulation or marked during production. This is the fundamental principle that drives modern numismatics and explains why collectors pay extraordinary premiums for coins in exceptional condition regardless of their age or composition. It's not about the metal. It's not about the historical age. It's about the simple reality that certain coins in certain grades are genuinely rare because survival in pristine condition is far more difficult than most people imagine. As we close our examination of these 4 remarkable Washington quarters, I want to emphasize that if you possess quarters from any of these dates, particularly if they came from mint sets, original rolls, or carefully preserved collections, the potential exists that you might own something far more valuable than face value. And having questionable pieces examined by professional services represents a modest investment that could reveal significant value. The numismatic marketplace for high-grade modern quarters has matured substantially over the past 2 decades, with registry set competition, sophisticated collectors, and increasing appreciation for condition rarity driving strong demand for the finest available examples. And the documented auction results we've discussed throughout this presentation provide concrete evidence that serious collectors will pay substantial premiums to own exceptional coins regardless of their production era. I encourage you to examine your own collections carefully. Consider having promising pieces professionally certified through PCGS or NGC if you believe they might merit elite grades. And continue educating yourself about the technical factors that create value in the numismatic marketplace, because knowledge is the foundation of successful collecting, whether your focus is enjoyment of the hobby or building value over time. If you found this comprehensive analysis valuable, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe to the Coin Hunter to ensure you don't miss future research we conduct on valuable coins that serious collectors need to understand. And please share this information with fellow collectors who appreciate thoroughly researched content that respects their intelligence and delivers substantive information they can actually use. The comment section is always open for sharing your own discoveries, experiences with these dates, or questions about authentication and grading that I'm happy to address in future content. And I'm genuinely interested in hearing from viewers who might own examples of these coins because every discovery story adds to our collective knowledge of what survives and where these pieces might be found. Thank you for investing your time in this detailed examination of these 4 Washington quarters. Your attention and engagement mean that we can continue producing the kind of in-depth numismatic research that serves the serious collector community, and I look forward to bringing you more valuable content that helps you navigate the fascinating world of coin collecting with confidence and knowledge. Until next time, examine your coins carefully, seek professional guidance when values justify the investment, and remember that the finest examples of even recent coins can represent genuinely rare survivors worthy of serious collector attention and substantial financial investment.